Welcome back to Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life, the podcast. You're listening to Author's Corner, where we highlight and showcase our local authors. Today, I am speaking to Carlamay Sheremata, author of Youth Truth, engaging in conversations that can change lives. Welcome, Carlamay.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so happy to have this conversation with you. I mean, you've got some good content on, surviving and building resilience. So our topic today is going to be healing from the inside out, surviving cancer and PTSD, three strategies for mental and physical resilience after trauma. Yes, and that's the reason that we're bridging the book is because we want to be able to build these things from our youth because foundation is very important. You can't learn it when you're an adult and going through it. You learn from the foundation. So awesome. So let me give you guys a brief intro. With over 2 decades in law enforcement, Carlamay specialized in various units, including a school resource officer, and has continued advocating for youth and women empowerment. A cancer survivor, single parent, and PTSD advocate, she embodies resilience and defies societal expectations. Now an author, she bridges generational gaps through writing, helping parents and educators understand the unspoken need of today's youth. When not writing or speaking, she enjoys singing, serving others, spending time with her husband, son, and loved ones, aiming to leave a lasting legacy through her work and personal life. All right, Carly. So as we get into our topic today, as someone who has survived and thrived through difficult circumstances, surviving cancer and PTSD, how did your law enforcement background help shape the way you view resilience in the face of trauma?
Well, looking back, so with the cancer and single parenthood, that kind of went on as I was getting into policing as well as during my time. And then, with the PTSD, I actually didn't even realize that I was suffering from it until I got diagnosed with it. And I think the biggest thing with the law enforcement is um, there for us, there's always an A, B, C, or D, right? And so whatever situation you got into, if A didn't work, you went very quickly into and C and D because a lot of times your life depended on that. And looking back now, having been out of law enforcement for a little over a year, um, that really showed me that no matter what situation you got into or where you ended up, there was always a way out, and there was always a way to look at things from another view and from another, I guess, lens through another lens. Um, and that can go with, I mean, whether you're looking at something with an empathetic lens or compassionate lens, but then sometimes you have to look at it from a completely other side. And that's the same with looking at resilience too, is we can stop and look at our traumas where we're at, and you can sit and go, oh, this happened again, or this is always happening to me. You know, I can't trust anybody. Um, the bad always comes. Or we can stop and look and say, you know what? Okay, this has happened. What can I do now so that I can keep, stepping forward or keep building and looking at the positive? It's kind of that glass half full mentality, I guess we can say.
All right, that's pretty good. A couple circle backs. So, how did your PTSD start? Was it in law enforcement? My husband was a police officer for 10 years or so. And one of the things he always said is that, yeah, when you leave home in the morning, you're not sure if you're coming back because it's a very violent industry. And you're carrying a gun and you never know who you're gonna, come into contact with. And he's seen lots of people, that are deceased. So how did your PTSD start?
I believe that maybe some stuff from earlier on had, that you think you deal with, but then all of a sudden something happens, on the job and it starts bringing stuff up. The one interesting thing I really found, so for me, I never felt a shame about going to a psychologist. So all through my career, I always was going for maintenance, and then if something happened, I would go and talk to the psychologist just to make sure I was okay. I have a background in psych and sociology, so I understood, you know, that how traumas can affect our brain and can affect us, and even stress. So that's when I finally, got diagnosed, I kinda was like a deer in the headlights because you kinda sit back and go, how me?" Like, I was taking care of myself,
Yeah.
but when I started going through the treatment program, I didn't realize how much I actually had pushed down, had thought I dealt with, but
Wow.
then just stuff that you push down, and it could be situations, like you went to 3 or 4 domestics or suicides, and, it was kinda like, "Okay, well, it's another suicide," and I mean, for some people, they might think, How could you look at stuff like that?" But putting my yourself in my shoes where you could have 4 or 5, suicides in one day, right? And so you literally had to get yourself prepared and, go deal with the situation, talk to the families, and then, you go into brief if you were able to do that. But you kind of honestly just kind of push that down that it was another call that you went to, right? So that is where I kind of feel that things really started piling, but me not really realizing that they were piling up.
Mm. Okay. So the law enforcement was the trigger for something that started in your childhood.
Yeah,
And okay. All right.
and I think too, we think PTSD, like military, being on the battlefield, killings, that kind of stuff. But everybody's trauma is so different. And how we each handle with our own trauma, something so little as somebody else could have been their biggest thing that happened to them in their life. That could have been the trigger.
Right. 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 Well, I know about pushing things down. I don't have PTSD, but I know that when I went to, I went to a couple of months of therapy myself, and I went because I felt that I was getting angry, and I know that there was something that I was pushing down, and that's basically what, I pushed down a lot of stuff through my life, and you didn't deal with it, so it comes back up as anger or triggers or whatever. Okay. So that's the question I had about the PTSD. So, you also survived cancer. You're a cancer survivor. How did that affect, you know, your mental state?
When I look back with that, because that was earlier on, I think I was 26 when that came on. For me, it was a lot of it had to do with mind over matter and my faith. Prayer for me was a huge thing for me, and just getting prayer warriors around me. And I believe for myself that the hope that I had, I don't know if I would have been in that situation if I wouldn't have had my faith.
Mm.
And so that was a huge part for me. And I believe that, everybody goes through cancer in their own way, and we don't know what that looks like for everybody. And that's okay. How each person deals with it is how they deal with it. And for me, mind over matter was a huge thing. Was I was going to get through this because I was just going through the process,
What'd you
trying to
say?
get into
That's
the
very young too.
yeah.
Uh,
So
that's
trying to get into
devastating.
police,
Yeah.
I went through this, and I did not wanna give up my chances of getting into the police. So for me, there was no going back. It was, "I'm fighting this, I'm dealing with treatment, and we're gonna keep going." So
Pretty good. That's pretty good. Hey. Yeah, I saw my sister through stage 4 of cancer as well, and she's better now, but yeah, we did a lot of praying, and, I have a lot of faith and she pulled through it, so I'm
yeah.
glad
And my
that
mom's
sorry.
going through breast cancer right now, and so so again, we've got our prayer warriors behind us, and I believe in healing. So for me, that's very, very important.
Yeah, yeah, yes, my, my very last episode, I talked about, the subject that there's no atheists in a foxhole, Because regardless of if you say that you don't believe in a higher power, you don't believe in God, when you go through diagnosis like this, you find God, you pray, you
Yes.
ask for help, right?
Yeah.
So
You
you,
cry out. It's
yeah,
crazy. People are like, I never believed or thought of God until all of a sudden I was crying out.
yeah,
I'm like, yep,
yeah,
yep,
absolutely true. And that's why I wrote that episode. There's no
yep.
atheist foxhole, right? When you
I
ask,
love it.
yeah. So, yeah, so I'm pretty glad. I'm glad that we're, confirming that. Amazing. All right. You also say in your work that healing from trauma isn't a linear journey. What are some of the unexpected challenges you faced in your own recovery, and how did you overcome them?
Well, let's see. So some of the I think some of the especially with the PTSD is it's the triggers are some
Mm.
big things. And for people who actually don't go through the treatment, and again, I believe for myself, prayer was a huge thing with that as well. But the triggers can really take over, and they can actually, freeze you in certain situations where you can get stuck. And if you do not work on those issues, with psychologists or whoever you're working with through them, you can actually get really stuck in some of these. And again, um, I don't want to use the term victim mentality. I don't know another term to use, but um, the hard thing for me was as a police officer, we went to so many different calls where we did see victims, but true actual victims of things. And it was very hard for me when all of a sudden I would get into a situation for myself, a trauma, some kind of trauma, or even with this PTSD. I did not want to consider myself a victim because
Mm.
for me, I
Right.
saw real victims.
Right.
And
Yes.
so talking to other people in some of the treatments, and they would get wrapped up into this victim mentality, and that is one thing for me I really did not want to get myself wrapped in, because you talk about a rabbit hole, it can take you down a rabbit hole very quickly
Yeah.
and put you into a very different, mental state.
Yeah.
And so that was, these are some of the things that I did notice. And I think I feel very blessed because I was able to work through a lot of stuff. And again, prayer was a huge part of my life. And I was able to get through a lot of that stuff through prayer.
Well, also, you said that you always went to a therapist for maintenance. Is very important. And I had a childhood that wasn't the best. I was molested as a child and all that. And one of the things when I wrote my book, the first thing that I said is that I'm not a victim because victims have no power. I mean, if you live your life being a victim, I'm glad that you talked about the rabbit hole. If you and the victim means that you are thinking that the reason that your life is not going well is because what happened to you either as a child or what happened to you as a young adult or what happened to you, your spouse cheated on you or your boss did something to you, and you play the blame game. And when you play the blame game, what you're actually essentially doing is that you're giving that person power over you. So, one of the first things that, I teach is that victims have no power, that you've got to look at life like a deck of cards, and regardless of what card is showing. If you play blackjack, people might think that you're seeing the dealer is showing a 10 and you've got a 2, and you might think right away that you can't win, but you know that you can win.
Yes, it's
It's
true.
not what is presenting itself, is how you play the game. So if you play to win, like you just said, you're playing to win, you wanted to be a police officer and you weren't going to let these things distract you, and you worked, you prayed, you went to a therapist, you did the other work that you needed to do. And yeah, when you use the word that it's not a linear journey, meaning that I'm getting from that is that you did the work, you're doing stuff, and then right off the bat, something could knock you off again, and you got to go back on it. Is that what you meant by that?
Yeah, it's like this, and I think it's the same thing when, we look at grief.
Yes.
People think that grief, well, I'm going to be sad, I'm going to be angry, and then I'm going to deal with stuff. My goodness, there were days when, even going through treatment or even with the PTSD, I was like, okay, I'm having an amazing day. Like I can conquer the world. The next day it's like, oh my gosh, my life is in here. And then I'm so angry. And, it's like this. And
Yes.
that is okay because if everything was like this, how boring. Like seriously, how boring, and we would kind of know how things would go,
Sure.
and, there wouldn't be that yeah, I don't wanna call excitement in our lives, but you know what?
Right.
That's just how life goes, and
Yes.
we never know what we're gonna be throwing.
Well, it also takes a great mental attitude to recognize that because a lot of people get knocked down like a wave and then they stay down because like you mentioned, just in passing that you saying, why is this always happen to me? Why do I always get knocked down? Why am I always on my ass? You know what I mean? And you're looking at it from a pessimistic victim mentality. And guess what? You know what happens? Because I believe in the law of attraction. When you stay there and you wallow in that kind of energy, more waves are gonna come knock you down.
Yes. And the people that come around you, you kinda sit back and go, "Oh my goodness, why am I, like, attracting all these people?"
Shut down.
And
Yes.
it's interesting because I was a school resource officer, and one of the things that I really noticed and continuously heard, and even heard from parents, but the kids, well, that's, my parents, this is because of my parents, and it was all my parents' fault, or, even talking to parents, well, that's how I was raised. Okay, but are you gonna stay that way, or are you gonna make a change and make a difference and be that different person so that when you have your own kids, you don't have to go down that same path, but you can actually start something refreshing and new.
Yes. Yes. I agree with that. When I think I read a book the other day that people were saying that if your only influence in life is like your mother or father that never learned anything, other than to be a parent, parenting doesn't come with a manual. They are teaching you what their parents taught them. And if that's your only source, then you're right. You're not gonna be able to very rarely are you gonna be able to excel in this life by just taking what your parents said. And you're right, your parents could be that's how people teach hate and people teach racism and all that kind of stuff. You've got to learn for yourself. You've got to figure out by reading some books and going to therapy and making a change. But you're right, it's a change that you have to consciously make. Else you're just going to repeating the cycle and repeating the patterns. So,
Yeah, it's so true.
conversation that we're having today.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
okay. All right. Now, how has your own healing journey reshaped your outlook on life? And what new insights do you now carry forward that you didn't have before? So we talked about the surviving cancer. You had great faith, so I'm very happy that you're a survivor. And then PTSD, and I'm pretty sure there's a whole bunch of other challenges working in law enforcement. It's not a piece of cake. So what are you carrying forward that that you didn't learn from your parents since we just started talking about bringing forward things from parents?
Well, looking back, one of the things for my parents, I've taken the resilience factor for me has been, pushing forward that, if there's work to be done, you don't stop. You keep going. And, both my parents, farm families. And so I remember summer times we'd go back to the farm and with, grandma and grandpa, and that was the way it went. There was work to be done, you did it.
Mm.
And that's one thing that I have watched and continued. And even with policing, when I look at, um, everything that I did, I had an amazing career. I got to go into so many different units and know that what I gave of myself and the impact that I had on people and that others had on me was huge. And I have a 16-year-old son, and that is really important for me to be able to instill these things into him. And, going back with the parents, our parents, again, like you said, they did to us and taught us only what they knew and how they were raised, right?
Right.
And so I think it's really important as youth, because who knows, my son might one day might say, "Oh, well, my mom did that because that's all she knew." Yeah, you know what? That was all I knew at the time, and now you take that, go forward with it, but because, that now I'm
That
expecting that you will take that forward. Um, but I think that, resilience, not stopping, looking at things, I've always been very optimistic. You know what? And trust. The one thing for me, I thought that becoming a police officer, I'd get very jaded and that I would lose like a lot of trust with people. And sometimes it's been a detriment to me. I'm going to be honest, because sometimes I've trusted people that I probably shouldn't have.
right.
But for me, I was always given the benefit of the doubt. And I really believe that that was important for people.
Yeah, I know what you mean because yeah, when you're a police officer, you really come into a lot of the what is a good word? The derelicts of society, right? And you see
The
these
less
things that are happening.
desirable.
What was that? What you call them?
The less desirable.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
The less desirable, right? So you come into contact with them a lot, and you're right. It can shape your outlook, and it can, you can go around saying that, because of who you're associating with on a daily basis, that you can go around by thinking, people are not trustworthy and everybody steals and lies and cheats and do all these different things. But I like what you just said, that you love what you did as a career person. So my husband again, because we're black working in the hood, you know, what he would do is try to save the youth. He didn't go in there trying to put them all away in jail. When he sees like a black youth, he will try to talk to them and try to, instill on them, hey, you don't want to go down that path because you're never gonna get over it and things like that. So yeah, police officers can be good role models and help citizens and not just try to I mean, I was, um, I was, doing an application for, someone, recently for housing, and there was a charge on there from 20 years ago where he was in a yard, not even driving, with, like, a beer or something. And you know that that police officer wrote him up and give him some kinda ticket or something, and 20 years later, it's on his police record. Now I'm thinking that that's a bad cop. You know what I mean? Someone that doesn't care about the youth and someone that would attach. And that's why my husband would say, even when he sees someone with marijuana, you wouldn't write them a ticket for that because that stuff goes with you forever, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. When you become a good person and you go into your job as wanting to help and not take people down because you're power hungry, then it's a totally different experience. And it sounds like that's what you were because you talked about, how you gave yourself. You're not just taking. So
Well, and it's empowerment, right? Our our job, well, what I felt as a cop, yes, we're supposed to um enforce the law and all that kind of stuff. I get that. But
mhm,
we are also given that opportunity to help empower people. And, I just even looking with the youth, there are so many underlying reasons of why not only youth, but why people do certain things and some of the things they do. And a lot of times, you'd have to remember we are going to see people at their worst as a cop because that's the only reason they call us.
yes, right,
Something bad
right,
has happened,
right.
right?
Mhm.
Very rarely do we get a, hey, I've just
Get the
won the
puppy out of the
lottery.
tree or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, but that's the hard thing is that it was always the worst, the people. And so being able to take that situation, flip it around to see how can we use this to empower, our youth, and what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, not even empower a youth. You can empower someone that's in a domestic violence situation. You can talk to them and you
Yes.
know what I mean? Because they're talking to you and you can try to empower them in some way, give some advice, tell them where to go. Yeah. Instead of, yeah, I hear you. You are coming into these bad people. But if you are a really good person and a person that wants to help others, then you would find these situations to, I love your word, empower, encourage, right? And give some advice. They might not
And
take
it's
it, but at least you're giving it.
well, exactly, and it's so important because, no matter who you are, not even as a cop, I mean, we all even just saying good morning or hi to somebody or, "You look really nice," that can change a person's whole direction of that day, right? So that's the thing is all it takes is one person.
Right, right. Excellent. Awesome. All right. So tell us about your book. It's called Youth Truth, Engaging in Conversations That Can Change Lives. So why did you write it and what do you want readers to walk away with after reading?
Yes, so here I have a picture, so if I
Okay.
don't know how
Very
well that
nice.
is.
I love the
Um,
colors.
yes, I so my whole reasoning behind that, when I was working in the high schools, uh, I would have youth come in, on a regular basis and just break down in tears about stuff that they were afraid to talk to their parents about or about to adults about. Whether it be suicide, bullying, self-harm, sex, pregnancy, eating disorders, all of the stuff that our youth is are going through and that are happening in our schools. And then so when I would bring the parents in, to either mediate or if the kids ended up needing to go to the hospital or whatever, watching how the parents would respond, and a lot of these parents didn't know how to handle this and didn't know how to talk to their kids about this stuff.
Right.
So that is where this book came from. And so the first 9 chapters deal with youth themselves, and they're telling their stories on suicide, self-harm, all of these different things that they have gone through. And then the last chapter gives tools to either the parents, grandparents are huge, aunts and uncles, huge, huge resources. Anybody who is an advocate for youth. And it's not a self help book because, as parents, again, we do with what we know with what we have.
Mhm.
But what this is it is adding into your toolbox so that if you feel stuck, that you can't get through to your youth about something, or even talking about resilience, because that's another thing. How do you talk to your kid about resilience when you have a kid that doesn't even want to get out of bed in the morning for school, right? What does that look like?
Right.
So these tools are just little tools, but these little tools can be so huge. And even for instance, gaming. How many of our kids sit in front of, and game? They barely talk to us. How's school? Fine. What'd you do? Nothing. But yet I had a mom, coming to me, 15-year-old kid. She said, "I can't get through to my kid.
Right.
He eats so fast at the table and, because he wants to go back downstairs." And I said, "Why don't you go down with him and ask him, teach me how to game?" She's like, "I hate gaming." I said, "I know, but suck it up, head downstairs, and even for 10 minutes." And
That's good
she did
advice.
that.
Right.
Well, and her son looked at her kind of like, "You hate this," but she said, "I wanna spend time with you, and if this is how I have to do it, I'm gonna do it."
Yes.
So, he taught her, she died, of course, in the game, but 2 weeks later, she said he came upstairs, looked around the kitchen to make sure nobody else was there, and started talking to her about an incident that happened at school.
Oh
She
my
said,
God.
"I have not had a conversation like this with him ever." So now, once a month, they go down, she goes down, he got a game for her that she actually can play and enjoy, and they don't talk a lot, but they spend the time together.
That's
And it's that yeah, it's that quality time. So, again, something as simple as that can change the whole direction of a relationship and conversation.
I like that. I like that. That's actually a very good advice because parents try to force their kids to talk and they don't want to talk, right? But if you just open up the space where, yeah, you're playing a game, and I normally see fathers do that, not necessarily mothers, because I don't think I've ever played a video game. So, but fathers,
Yep.
fathers will go and, play the video game and spend time with their boys that way. But and they're doing that, you're right, so that the boy can, when he has a problem, can talk to them, talk to their dad because he feels, that they're in kind of relationship. So that's good for the mothers, or even people in romantic relationships. The guy is playing a game, the woman can go and play and also
Yeah.
bridge that. So this is actually good information that people would not normally think of. So that's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, and I think one of the things too, as adults, as parents, we feel we know, like we can fix everything for our kids, right? And a lot of times the kids just want to be heard. They just want to be, they don't want to be told what they did wrong or told, if you do this, it'll all get better.
Mhm.
They don't need advice at that time. They just want somebody to listen. And, kids want to be seen, heard, and valued just like us as adults.
Right.
That's what we want.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So that's amazing. All right. So I love your book. I love listen, there's a lot of they teenagers. I mean, they are the generation right now that needs a lot of help. So as we come out with these type of resources for the parents, to help them, and counselors, and people in school, that's in their face, that can make a difference. This type of resource is pretty good. So awesome. So tell our listeners where they can, pick up a copy of your book. I'm sure it's on Amazon, your website, social media handles, those type of things.
Sure. So yeah, Youth Truth is on Amazon.com and .ca, depending where you are, because I'm in Canada. And
Okay.
it's also at in different bookstores as well. All of the Ingram Spark, so Chapters Indigo, wherever else the little bricks and mortar bookstores, you can order it.
Mhm.
Website is www.carlamaysheremata.com. And I do everything from keynote speaking to family mediation, workshops, all of that stuff, because I think it's so important, just that whole connection part piece and, and the resilience piece, empowerment. So that's very, very important as well.
Okay, that's amazing. Are you on social media?
Yes. Instagram, Carla May Shermata, LinkedIn, Carla May Shermata.
That's easy. All right. So, so that's amazing. All right. Well, listen, this has been a good conversation, Carlamay. I'm glad that you were able to use your, cancer journey, your PTSD journey, your law enforcement journey, you know, um, communicating with the kids when you worked in school. So you've got a wide range of information to share. And I'm glad that you are sharing it to the world, and helping people along their journey, because as a woman of faith, you know that God gives us a test so that we can have a testimony. And that's basically, this is your testimony, how you're helping other people to walk the path. So great conversation, great work that you're doing. I will have a summary of our conversation on the show page, which is myhelps.us. And I will link out to your website, link out to your book, and link out to your social media handles, so people can follow you and get that information. And like you said, if anybody is looking for someone for keynote speaking or to work with their kids in the school, then I guess they can reach out to you in those places as well.
Yes, they can.
All right. Well, listen, thanks for being on the show. And I'm glad I was able to highlight and showcase your work, because you're doing good work. So, as we wrap up, any last words?
No, that's everything. Thank you so much for what you do as well. I really appreciate it and was honored to be on today.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being on the show and sharing your knowledge. I love that. All right, guys. Well, listen, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Author's Corner. Charlemagne's book again is called You Truth, Engaging in Conversations That Can Change Lives. And go pick up a copy if you've got a teenager, you've got a youth, you've got anybody that can benefit from this work. So thanks for tuning in. Until next time, namaste.